Irshad Manji, you probably remember her from her first book, The Trouble with Islam. She's got a new book out now. It's called Allah, Liberty and Love, The Courage to Reconcile Faith and Freedom, now based in New York City, but she's a Vancouver girl, and welcome back home.
I'm happy to be home.
Nice to see you again. So it's been quite a few years since Trouble with Islam came out. Right. Two very different titles. I don't know that they're entirely different books, or maybe just the natural progression from one to the other.
Let me be very clear. Allah, Liberty and Love is a book that you do not have to have read any other books that I've written, or for that matter, any other books about Islam to really understand. Why? Because this is a book that at the end of the day, Sophie, is for both Muslims and non-Muslims. And it's really about how to live your life more honestly, more authentically, through developing something called moral courage. And that is the willingness to speak up when everyone else wants to shut you up.
And you've experienced that. You definitely experienced that when Trouble with Islam came out. You mentioned moral courage. We should also let our viewers know that you're the director of the Moral Courage Project at New York University.
Right.
What is that?
It teaches young people, but actually all people, because we do a lot of work through Facebook and Twitter and, people around the world, really shows them, how to speak truth to power within their own communities for a greater good. In other words, you can't blame everybody outside of your community for all of your own people's ills. Sometimes, in fact, a lot of the time, you have to step up to the plate and say, no, we've got stuff of our own that we have to own up to. But to say that, takes a lot of courage, because, of course, you're going to get backlash from your own people. So we actually teach all kinds of people how to develop that courage. And it's called moral courage, not because it's about morality or immorality, but it's because about the choices that we make about how we live our lives.
Right. And now that's, as you said, a theme, probably the major theme in this new book is how to teach people to stand up and speak out. After Trouble with Islam, a lot of Muslims wrote you and said, well, a lot of them said very negative things, obviously, but there were many who said, I agree with you, but how do I say it?
Yeah,
so
young Muslims.
So how do you do it?
Well, first of all, you've got to recognize, and I talk from a faith-based perspective to young Muslims, because the point here is, in fact, to reconcile faith and freedom. You've got to recognize that there doesn't actually have to be a showdown between faith and freedom, that one is not exclusive of the other. You actually can use your brain. You actually can ask questions out loud and still know that you are close to God. In fact, I make the point in the book that by asking questions out loud, even about your own religion, you actually get closer to God. And I know that sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, but you've got to read the book in order to understand the how of how to do that. But the other point to make is for non-Muslims. So many non-Muslims say to me, Irshad, I would love to support your mission to reconcile Islam with freedom, but if I do, I'll be called a bigot, I'll be called a racist and Islamophobe for actually talking about issues of Islam when I am myself not a Muslim. But Martin Luther King Jr. pointed out many, many generations ago in America that we don't live in splendid isolation of one another. What affects me winds up affecting you. And if that was true for 1960s America, imagine how much more true it is, Sophie, for a globally interconnected world. So we've got a lot to remind ourselves as a new generation of what we've already been taught, but now we need to apply to a 21st century multicultural environment.
So by non-Muslims trying not to offend, trying so hard not to offend, it actually does worse.
Well, it does worse because it allows all sorts of bad things that happen in the name of culture. It allows that to get a pass. But it also, if you as a non-Muslim, I should say, says to me as a Muslim, well, I'm not going to ask you anything that offends you. You're basically saying to me, you're not my equal. I don't have faith in your capacity to actually think for yourself. I'm going to treat you like a child. And I ask in the book, is that really respect?
Right.
That's not respect. That's the opposite of respect. So I think that we as Canadians have to really reimagine, what it means to love our freedoms. And notice that I say love, because it really is about being grateful for the freedoms that we've got in this country, which, as you know, so many young Muslims are putting their lives on the line for in the Arab Spring now. Let's be grateful for the freedoms we have, and part of being grateful is to use those freedoms.
Irshad, it's a fascinating book. Thank you so much for coming in. There's so much more we could talk about, but pick up the book because you can read all about it in here. Have a great trip back.
Thanks so much.
Irshad Manji and her new book, Allah, Liberty and Love, The Courage to Reconcile Faith and Freedom.